Hello and welcome. This presentation was created as part of my preparation for the Advanced Sommelier examination. I hope you can find useful information in here, and please feel free to post any comments you may have in the comment section. In this video we will talk about England, so let's begin. I would like to start by showing the sources I used to gather this information. These are some of my favorite wine books, and I strongly suggest using them for any research. England is the largest and warmest country in Great Britain and the only wine-producing country in the kingdom. Evidence of seeds and pollen shows the presence of Vitis vinifera pre-Roman era, which started in 43 AD. The Celts were already consuming wine in significant quantities, which we know due to clay amphora used to store wine. And once oak substituted the amphora, importation became even more prominent. England was already making wine as early as the 7th century, but imports were still a major form of supply. Trading with France increased during the 8th and 9th centuries, but routes were plagued by Viking pirate attacks, and in general beer was the most consumed alcoholic beverage, with wine being used largely for the Eucharist. The 11th and 12th centuries were a golden age for wine production, until currents changed in the 14th century, bringing wet and cloudy summers. The Golden Age was also crushed when Henry II married Eleanor of Aquitaine in the 12th century, and thus acquiring the region of Gascony. Importation increased dramatically, and wine became cheaper to buy than to grow, leading growers to uproot their vines and plant fruit trees instead. Another great blow to the English viticultural progress was the Black Death in the 14th century, decimating the workforce and causing monasteries to cease production. Initially, imports were predominantly from Île-de-France, Poitou, and Anjou, but when Gascony was acquired, Bordeaux quickly became the largest and most important supplier. Wines were shipped twice a year, in the fall and in the spring. Newly harvested wines did not arrive in England before November, and spring shipments carried wines of rack, a more expensive offer, as these wines were held in casks on lees until the spring, waiting for the second shipment. As wines did not keep from year to year, previous year wines were sold off cheap at auctions to give way to the new arrivals. White wines were more expensive than reds, and the most expensive wines in the mid-14th century were sweet wines from southern Europe, as these sweeter fortified wines lasted longer than the wines provided by Bordeaux. Vernaccia from Italy was the most expensive, but Malvasia or Momsi from Cyprus and Crete were also popular favorites. Alsace and Rhine were also highly valued, as they were brilliant and clear. Spanish wines were considered cheaper due to their higher alcohol content, and they were often used to cut more expensive wines with, and fears of adulteration spread widely, which paved the way to the acceptance of bottled shipments of wine. The mid-20th century saw a renewed interest in wine growing at home. England experienced a modern industry revival started in 1945 by Raymond Barrington Raybrock, and the first commercial vineyard was planted in Hambledon in Hampshire by Sir Guy Salisbury Jones. Due to the harsh climatic environment, Germanic crossings and hybrids were the primary plantings creating Germanic styles of wines. Climate change has highly favored the region, leading to a revolution in vine varieties, and wine quality is continuously improving to a point that English sparkling wines start to rival champagne. I know that was a lot of information, so here's a quick summary of what we just learned. England was a large importer and consumer of wine and experienced a boom in production between the 11th and 14th centuries, which was halted by the acquisition of Bordeaux and the Black Death. In the mid-20th century, England saw a renewed interest in wine growing, with a heavy influence from Germanic varietals. The country is situated in the 51st parallel in line with Vancouver, Canada, Bonn, Germany, and Bohemia in Czech. Vines are mainly planted in the southeast of England, where the Gulf Stream influence is greatest, moderating the climate in the area. Kent and Sussex, with clay and chalk soils, closely resembles the soil of Champagne. Surrey, nestled south of London and away from the shore, enjoys warm temperatures. Hampshire has a temperate climate, and southwest and Wales the wettest. East Anglia, above the 52nd parallel, is the driest place in England. Soils throughout the wine-growing region is much like Champagne. The climate is maritime and extremely unstable, but it is aided by the effects of climate change, and the Gulf Stream is the main climate moderator, passing through the English Channel and warming the coastal range to the south. Average temperature during growing season is 57 Fahrenheit, 14 Celsius, and average annual rainfall is 26 inches, making it both colder and wetter than Champagne. Some of the climate threats the area faces include poor fruit set, low yields, and too high acidity. Currently, the most planted varieties are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Bacchus, and Meunier, but as previously mentioned, earlier styles were Germanic due to hybrids used to withstand the cold, such as Müller-Thurgau, Reichsteiner, Schönberger, and Solaris. If you watched my previous presentation of Switzerland, you might recognize the last one from when we discussed PV grapes, Pilza Vida Standsfähige Rebsorten, which are disease-resistant varieties. Virtually all counties throughout England grow wine grapes, but the majority of the vines are located in the southern counties closest to the Gulf Stream. There are a total of 600 registered vineyards and 145 wineries. Harvest usually happens in late September to late October, and sometimes can carry into November. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier comprise 61% of land under vine. 80% of production is white, and most of the rest is rosé, which is predominantly made with Bacchus, but overall the focus is on sparkling wine production. Chaptalization is common, but less and less needed, and wines tend to be low in alcohol and high in acid. English wine laws are uncertain after Brexit. Under EU law, chaptalization was allowed up to 3% for every year, and 3.5% in abnormal years, and acidification is not permitted, except in sparkling wines post-disgorgement for stabilization, as it is in Champagne. The appellation system set up under EU regulations dictated that for a wine to be labeled PDO, 100% of the grapes must be from the demarcation on the label. PGI allowed regional wines to be made with a minimum of 85% from the demarcation. Varietal wines were wines without geographical indication that went through a certification process, and 85% of the grapes used must be from the vintage demarcated. And wine, the lowest category, did not allow for region, variety, or vintage demarcations. It is possible that these regulations will be upheld after the British exit from the EU, but as of the time of this presentation was created, it is still uncertain. The most up-to-date regulatory text I encountered laid the groundwork for wine production. Still wines must be clear and bright, and tartaric crystals and sediments may occur. Nose and palate should be clean and enhanced aromatics with refreshing acidity. Minimum alcohol before chaptalization must be at least 6%, and enrichment may not exceed 3 or 3.5% in exceptional years. Minimum final alcohol must be of 8.5%, with 9% for chaptalized wines, and a maximum alcohol of 15%. Deacidification is permitted, but acidification is not, and a minimum acidity of 4 grams per liter, and sweetening is allowed. Sparkling wines are somewhat different. Visually, they must be clear with low sedimentary deposit, and nose and palate should show fruit flavors with autolytic flavors from secondary fermentation. As with still wines, minimum alcohol must be 6%, and total alcohol of the cuvée at a minimum of 9%. The minimum for the final wine is 10%. Wines must be made using traditional method with 9 months of lees aging, and out of 6 permitted varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir Précoce, an earlier ripening mutation of Pinot Noir, Meunier, Pinot Blanc, and Pinot Gris. De-acidification is permitted, but acidification is not. Minimal acidity of 4 grams per liter, and sweetening is not allowed. Here are some major producers you may be able to find in the international markets. Chapel Down in Kent is the largest producer. Night Timber in West Sussex is the largest landowner. And Bright Valley in the southwest was owned by the late Stephen Spurrier. All great producers of sparkling wine. How about you? Have you ever visited England? What is your favorite English wine? I'd love to keep this conversation going, so leave your comment below and I'll be glad to see what you have to share. I know this was a long presentation, so I thank you for sticking around and I hope that this was useful to you in any way. If you would like to see more of these presentations, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Instagram. I'm hoping to publish one video every week, so stay tuned for more content.